Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second episode of PTV Talks, where we're going to talk about what is new with PTV Vistro. We are joined by our principal engineer experts, Bill Cisco and Adam Lynch, who will share what is new in PTV Vistro for 2023. So we're going to let a couple people come in for maybe the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're going to start our webinar. For those who just joined us, we are waiting maybe another minute or two to let a couple more people come into this webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I think this is a good starting point. Welcome to the second episode of PTV Talks, PTV Vistro, What's New? We have our experts with us, Bill Cisco and Adam Lynch, who are going to share what's new with PTV Vistro for 2023. Today's agenda, we will go over the available web materials and news, a 2022 recap, what's to come in 2023, and future potential features that's going to be within PTV Bistro. And then after that, we're going to jump into PTV Vistro 2023, a UTDF interface and imports, ITE trip generation, and then we're going to proceed and finalize with a question and answer session. Now, we do have 2 more PTV talks for the remainder of 2022. The third episode will be on December 6th at noon, and that'll be What's New with PTV Vism. And the last episode will be December 13th at noon, Eastern Standard Time, of course, and that will be discussing what's new for PTV Visum in 2023. And then sometime maybe in the middle of December, we will have the 2023 PTV Talk schedule released, so you can sign up for those sessions. And now I'm going to pass it to our principal engineer, Adam Lynch, and he will take it from here.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining PTV Talks. I scanned over the attendees list and I see a lot of new names, which is always a great feeling to have new people experiencing PTV Talks with us. Yeah, today we're going to talk about the What's New in Vistro 2023. And just so we can get started quickly, first thing we're going to talk about is the new web materials and content that we have available to discuss and talk about Vistro. Many of you have probably already seen, at least I hope you have already seen, our new PTV group websites that we have for our products. Vistro also has a new website for the product to showcase the product. It has new text and new summaries and information to describe the product. So if you are wanting to discuss Vistro to agencies or to your neighbor or to any colleague, you can use this to really describe the product and communicate the product to your friends. As well as we have some testimonials and of course our knowledge base area. I'm sure a lot of you have already used that to learn about features and use cases for Vistro. But it's all there. A little bit more about our knowledge base area. Again, here's some QR codes to get into that. We have the feature and use case center. We have a good resource of web and training videos. Today's video will also be included eventually into that area. There's self-learning tutorials. One is a very long one about signal timing and setting up traffic signal controllers. It goes really deep into the software. We discuss also this urban mobility system concept about connecting Vistro to also Visum and Visum, which is a good resource. And then finally, nice shameless plug, please join our PTV Vistro LinkedIn forum, and that's where you can learn about new updates and new things. So for our testimonials, some of you have probably seen this already, but we have been collecting a lot of great news all over the place. So we are starting to have some of our customers talk about Vistro and their YouTube videos and their presentations and things like that. So this video that's in the top left corner is a really good example of someone other than a PTV person talking about our products. And that's always nice to see that. We also have on the right side 2 pretty well written articles to share with your colleagues and other agencies about Vistro and its use cases. One is how Vistro is being used in Silicon Valley. You may have heard that story. And then the other one is about how Vistro is being used for a TIA project for an In-N-Out burger. So if you're interested in TIAs, this could be a thing for you. And later, we're going to talk about some TIA stuff. Also, yeah, there's some references on our trusted customers and some of our agencies that are using our software that you could talk to us or maybe reach out to them to discuss Vistro. And you probably have seen us in ITE news lately. We've been in a few articles talking about the ITE trip generation feature, which Bill will discuss a little bit later in the talk today.
Adam, your audio cut out. Can you hear me? We haven't heard anything after the ITE, the initial ITE discussion. So I think Adam clearly is having some issues. People are saying they can hear me, but not him, and slides haven't advanced. So hopefully Adam will be able to get over this technical hurdle pretty quickly. Hang in there with us. I'm a little rusty. We did not get a second copy of his presentation over to me. So we'll wait a minute or two, and if worst case, I'll throw my Vistro demo ahead of schedule for him. And he is aware of the issue. I'm getting a Teams message from him. So
Let me know.
there we go.
Perfect.
Hear you now.
I have no idea what I'm striking out with webinars over the past couple, right? Got cut off last time. This time, leaving out. All right, so I better talk quickly so before the internet really goes out for sure. So we're gonna. I think you saw the ITE stuff as when the last time it cut out. So anyway, let's talk about what we've done mid-year with Vistro 2022 after last year's release in 2021. But there's been three major things that we worked on mid-year. One was the HCM 7th edition, then one was a license size update, and then lastly, we started the ITE trip generation topic last year. So, and again, we're not going to talk about that yet because Bill's going to go into more details with it. And then with the HCM 7th edition, let's see here. Is it loading again? There we go. Are you guys still hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you, and it did finally advance.
It is going slow today. All right, with the HCM 7th edition, we have that in Vistro at roundabouts and signalized intersections. The one thing is probably notable to point out is now you can use Vistro for your connected and autonomous vehicle analyses. It's really simple with this 7th edition methodology. There's a proportion for CAVs, and you can just quickly enter this percentage at the intersection. And by doing that, you can really test your future conditions and see what is actually going to happen to the capacity with a connected and autonomous vehicle. One other thing we'd like to mention about this is that during the study for this implementation of HCM7, they also used VISM. So they're using our tools to come up with this methodology for the highway capacity manual. So that's cool. We have the license size update. So I guess one thing to note, you have to refresh your license to get this. So some of you that may have refreshed it pretty late, I guess after the spring, probably already have this. But we updated the limits from our old node limit of about 2,500 nodes to now our new limit of about 10,000 nodes. And because Vistro is a little bit complex to figure out how many intersections that is, it's about 2,500 or about 3,000 intersections that you can include into your model for Vistro. And the reason why we did this is that we're working with a larger set of partners that need to model quite a few signals in a larger area, such as Houston and Montreal, and a couple of regions such as VTA and Corpus Christi. And they just need those larger capabilities. But of course, all of you can take advantage of that. And to summarize the 2023 release features, I'm going to talk about the UTDF imports today. and then also jump into a demo about this. So for the UTDF import, this is part of the story for Vistro 2023 is that we want to incorporate data into Vistro from external sources. That was the main theme for Vistro 2023 release. And we enabled this UTDF import. You're probably saying that's not a new thing. UTDFs have been out for a while, but we got it into Vistro, but we did it in a very interesting way, which I think you'll see during this demo. The reason why we have this import is because, of course, we want to connect Econolite signal data to Vistro. And we also reached out to Miovision, since they are a pretty large provider of turn movement counts within the industry, at least in North America. We reached out to them to see how we could bring their data into Vistro a little bit better. So if you're doing traffic impact studies or any other study and you have Miovision data, turn movement count data, you could use this UTDF import to bring that in to Vistro. And let me show you how this works. And again, hopefully I don't get cut off. I'm going to go a little bit slower with the screen navigation here. I have a very basic network that I just coded today in Lima, Ohio. It has 4 intersections here. I actually picked the most interesting corridor, I think, because West Street is actually a north-south street and North Street is an east-west street. That one threw me for a loop, but I figured it out. But okay, so with this intersection, I want to import some data using the UTDF importer. This will now be under our file imports. And then we have UTDF with selection here on the import. Now within a service pack that will be coming out, I guess now within a week, it's coming really close. We're finishing the final tests. There will be this new dialogue within the import, and that's why I'm showing it to you in the PTV talks. Currently in the release version, this dialogue's not here, but it will be there very, very shortly. Within this import, you're able to select a folder that you have the UTDFs in, and then it will read all the UTDFs within that folder. So let me go ahead and click that. It remembers the last path that you searched. So I have a whole bunch of stuff here, blah, 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 blah. And then I say, select that folder. And when I select that folder, all of the UTDFs that I have are now listed in the dialog here. And it's broken down by UTDF type. We have lanes, we have phasings, we have timing plans, and of course we have volumes. And volumes in this case are the turn movement counts by days and by hours. And I'll go over each one of these in a second. Okay, so that's the basic setup. And then down at the bottom, there's import selection. There's a way to import by nodes. So of course, you can have a UTDF that just has one node per file. And sometimes that is delivered by providers that way. Miovision does that sometimes. If you only have one count or 2 counts, they can be delivered in separate files. Syntrax from Econolite does it that way, where their phasing files and their timing plan files are actually delivered by intersection or by node. But if it's all combined into one file, then you can break it out using these import selections as well. So yeah, you can do it by node. So if I check that, it will search the nodes within your model and you can pick which one. You can break it out by coordination group. So in this model, there's only one coordination group here, but if I had 2 or 3 or 4, it would list the coordination groups. That would be like a district or a corridor or something, and then all nodes. For the volume import, I'll go into this in a little bit more detail when we import one of those volumes. So first, let's just import our lane data that we have. Currently, everything is checked. I'm just gonna click none. Sorry, it's in German still. That's one thing we're working on right now, is converting this over. I just want to import the 4 lane files that we have. Miovision provides their data in lane files and the volume files. Just to show you what this looks like, I have my Internet Explorer folder. Let's just click on one. I actually truncated this a little bit manually using Excel. You can do that. But I imported just volumes, pedestrians, peak hour factors, and heavy vehicles. So this might be information you're getting from Miovision through their export process. I just pared one down really fast. Anyway, so that's what is in all of these lane files right here. So as soon as I click the import button, you'll see the turn movement counts coming in at each intersection. And then we'll verify that the peak hour factors and the heavy vehicle percentages came in that I had. So I'm going to click import, and it's going to read all 4 of those files right now. Sometimes it takes a second. It did work earlier. Give me 1 second here. Let me do it one more time. There we go. Make sure I got it all. Yep, all nodes, import. There they go. Sorry about that. I think I forgot to check something before. All right, so then it's importing all of the volumes for each one of these intersections. And if I go ahead and click on one of the intersections, we can go over to the volume tab within the workflow, and we can verify that I now have heavy vehicle percentages, which were the 2% as the default. I now have some movements that are 1% and some movements that are 3% coming in from the file. And I also have my peak hour factors down here in this row, down at where you can see my mouse maybe. It's now 95.95. And lastly, the pedestrians volumes did update as well for each of these intersections using the lane. Again, looking at the import here, let me go back to UTDF. You can set these up for a way to reset your counts or something like this. I could go back in and click a reset. That's basically all zeros for the intersections, and it could clear everything out. I was playing with that before. It was really handy. Let's talk about the volume file now, where you can get these turn movement counts. What this actually looks like, if I look at the combined file here, I'm going to make this screen a little bit bigger. Yeah. So you can actually import different time intervals within the turn count file. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 60 minutes, but we can actually do 5-minute data if you wanted to. What you would do is follow this format where you have a date, you have a time for the interval that respects the interval, and then you have the intersection here. So this file that I have, it's across multiple days worth of peak hour counts for the PM. It's from 3 p.m. to, I think it was about 7 p.m. is how I coded it, across 2 days. So I have things coming from August 15th and some counts coming in from August 16th. And what Vistro will actually do is look at the time interval that you select. If you're doing 15-minute bends, it will actually look at 4 of those time intervals that you select, add them together, and then average them across all of the days that you have within the scope of this volume import. And that's pretty neat to be able to do that really quickly. So let me show how that works. So I'm gonna, again, not check anything except for this volume import. You can see some information. It says we have 15-minute count intervals. We are across 2 days, and you get to see the start and the end interval. Let's just pick both available calendar days that I have. And let's say maybe my peak hour is 5 p.m. or something like this. These volumes are quite high. I wanted to make it drastic so you see that the import worked. So it's going to look pretty crazy. I think it's like 700 vehicles or something. So let's click import for that peak hour. Yeah, big volumes. So you can see that that imports quite quickly across all 4 intersections, and now I have the peak hour for that. I'm gonna do a quick reset here using that reset that I was mentioning. And we'll reset everything back to, let's just do it back to the timing that we had here. There we go. So this goes back to what the Miovision data may have looked like. And then lastly here, let's look at what the phasing looks like. So I mean, I have a few signals set up within the file, but let's again look at some basic phasing things. I mean, I might want to change all of my yellow to 4 seconds and all my reds to 2 seconds and my walks to 7 seconds or something like this. That's not in this file right now, but I can use the phasing UTDF to import that. So if I go to phasing and select all of the phasing, again, you can hold down Shift as well, and then that will select all 4. And if I click import, this will go through each of the signal phasings within the file and update those ambers from 3 and 1 second to 4 and 2 seconds for the amber and all red. And it's thinking, it's going through all of the different parameters and intervals. There we go. And you also notice that the splits kind of updated a little bit as well based on the information in that file. So now I have the amber at 4 seconds, the all red in 2 seconds, and the walk is 7 and 10 seconds. And that's across all of my signals. You can see that, you know, the cycle lengths are a little bit different based on the base inputs that we had from these phasings. But no need to worry. We can import now the timing plans. Maybe you're getting this from Syntrax as well. And these timing plans could be the patterns for the day or something like this. So let's just import something and make this the last one for this feature. Let's just import the 90 seconds timing plan here. And I'm gonna check that. Again, to show you what this looks like as a UTDF, I click on the 90 second. It's basically showing one timing plan across all 4 intersections, and then the splits for the various phases at each intersection. And you can also list an offset value for the position at each one of these intersections as well. So this file is actually really simple and basic, but I'm gonna go ahead and click import, and you'll notice I have the 60 seconds in the center of each intersection here. That will change then to 90 seconds, hopefully. And then you'll see the splits change at the intersection as well. So let's hit import. And it's thinking about that, importing the different timing patterns and plans at each intersection. And I think this is the last read. Oh, one more. There we go. All right, so now we have 90 seconds across the board on our corridor, and then our splits have changed to at 4 and 8 are the major street. Sorry for that, but that's what it was. So we have our major street with a nice green band that for this 90-second timing pattern. All right. So I cruise through UTDFs. And I'm gonna now transition over to Bill, and Bill can start talking about the ITE trip generation.
All right, fabulous. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that. So yeah, our next topic that we want to share today in terms of what's new is to highlight again our integrated new integration between PTV Vistro and the ITE trip generation web app, the Trip Gen 11. And what you see here is kind of a screenshot of what we'll see live in just a moment or two. And I'll let you read through the different benefits there, but I'll talk about them as well as we go through an example. Some of you may have participated in the webinar that I gave a couple months ago, month and a half ago, whatever it was, that was hosted by ITE. And that was a full hour devoted to this topic in all the TIA aspects of Vistro. So of course, we're gonna do a condensed version of that here in the next 10 to 15 minutes and still allow for plenty of Q&A. So if you do have questions, some of you have already done a great job. You've been entering questions in as we go. I've been trying to answer, I think, all of them except for one that we'll ask Adam afterwards about UTDF. But feel free to do the same while I'm presenting. Also, I just want to note here that in the chat box, I posted the links to the next 2 PTV Talks webinars that will be coming up in December. So you can find those links in the chat box. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my screen and let's walk through an example of using the new ITE TripGen API as part of Vistro 2023. And you know, like all seasoned people, I show you my my Teams chat instead. Okay, here we go. I guess it's smart enough. It's not showing my screen until I click a button. All right, great. It's not like Teams. All right, so here we go. So this is an example for Impact Analysis Network here in suburban Portland. This is kind of the area in which we'll focus today. Again, I'm highlighting in the interest of our 15 minutes that we have together, just the highlights, but I do want to walk us through the process, especially since some of you may not have seen how to build and analyze a TIA. So it just makes sense to do that as well as we go. All right, so my screen is refreshing. I'm going to point out that, you know, typically we think a lot when we're doing especially impact analyses about our different scenarios through our scenario manager. One thing I'll highlight, I'm going to add a zone and we're going to add trips in, and we're going to look and see how easy that is to do now as we move from an existing condition to our kind of with project condition. We may have an intermediate scenario, such as this near term, where in Vistro, of course, we can account for things like approved trips or what might be called in-process trips, depending on where you're at. And that's ways that we can account for that as well if there was another nearby project that we needed to have an intermediate traffic set for. But otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new scenario and evaluate a new zones traffic using the ITE trip app. So if you're a long-time listener, you'll remember that we had a full PTV Talks on TIAs. That is still available. All of our talks are available on our website, ptv.to/learn is one way to get there. And then that'll take you to a page where you can click on Vistro and go to our archives of our webinars. For the interest of time here, I'm going to do this in its most simplistic form. We're only dealing with PM. So I'm just going to add the zone and data in to the PM peak as I develop these scenarios. If you're doing a full-fledged TIA where you're having AM and PM and midday and so forth, please watch the other webinar in which I go back to the base scenario and add my data there. And that's really the more efficient way to do for a full impact analysis. But since we're only doing 15 minutes, I'm going to cut to the chase, and we're going to duplicate and create a new scenario from our PM. And I'm going to call this project. And then once I'm in that scenario, I'm going to add my zone. In this case, there's a parcel of land being developed. I'm going to place my zone here. And at that point in Vistro, in the interface, we have these three workflow tables: trip generation, distribution, and assignment. So we'll flip over to trip generation, and I'm going to switch my table position. This is the one workflow table in Vistro that makes sense to look at horizontally. So when I do that, then hopefully that is updated. Yes, it is. Okay, great. We can see my zone, and we can see the trip generation table. Here in the past, you would have entered your data manually or copied and pasted from Excel. Now I'm going to use this ITE TripGen login button. And the first thing I'm going to do is agree to ITE's terms and conditions for their license and click OK. And at that point, it will take me out to ITE's website where I will register. So as you can see during this step, you also need to have an ITE TripGen app login that you subscribe to separately directly from ITE. But once you have that, you would use the same username and password as you would to log in directly to ITE. When I enter that here, it'll tell me I'm logged in and return now to Vistro. And I'll see that my option is now to log out, which means that I'm logged in. And at this point, instead of entering things directly in this row with Vistro, I'll click the ITE TripGen edit button. And then that pulls up our interface here, which is essentially mimics what you would find if you're a user of the ITE TripGen 11 web app. So it should look very, very familiar to you. You can go through and search for land use code specifics, or you can go in and get your grouping by land use type. In this case, we're going to look at a multifamily residential unit. We'll do a mid-rise multifamily housing. But you can see all the options that are part of the ITE TripGen manual are available to me. And then I can have different subcategories like close to rail or not close to rail, what type of setting it might be, general, urban, suburban, dense, city, center, etc. Everything that's available in ITE TripGen manual or app is available through this interface as well. We'll do this based on dwelling units, and we're looking at a PM peak of adjacent traffic 4 to 6 p.m. And we're going to do our vehicle trip generation in this case. And we're going to have 80 units. And then at this point, I need to press the calculate button. Before I do that, if I'm not sure which land use type I really want to use, I can click this description and data plots. When I do that, it'll pull up a PDF of exactly what you would see in the ITE trip generation manual for this particular land use that I've selected. So here I can go through and double check, does this description really what I want or not? I mean, maybe I have a question about, is my project really mid-rise? What do I consider mid-rise the same as what they consider mid-rise? Depending on the type of land use, sometimes you need to double check. This says it's between 4 and 10 floors. So maybe I would have thought, oh, a 3 is a mid-rise. And then I say, oh no, that's not right. I got to go back and change my land use type. But in this case, I'm going to leave it with mid-rise, and I can go through and I can see all the different rates and data, et cetera, for all these different options. This is basically just shows you everything that you would see in the TripGen manual. Again, you had to have a license to it anyway, and so then we're able to show it to you without you having to go elsewhere to find it. So if I put in 80 units and click calculate, what I'll see is that this area below for average rate and fitted curve, that will then populate with values. So when I press calculate, then I can see that if I use ITE's average trip rate, I would get 31 trips. If I use the fitted curve, I'd get 32. So it's pretty similar in this kind of land use. It would probably be wildly different for retail. In fact, we'll look at an example of that in a little bit. But I can also click on this button, data plot and equation. And at this point, then what I get to see is the exact data plot for my data that I've entered, right, or for my project. So I said it was multifamily housing, not close to rail. I wanted it based on dwelling units, PM peak, weekday 4 to 6 p.m. And I can see that here's my data and, you know, all that good stuff. So that's great. And I can copy that into my report. And then I just need to decide, do I want to use the fitted curve or the average rate? And I'll go ahead and select average rate and click OK. And so I'll point out a couple things Vistro related at this point in time. Since I picked average rate, then it chooses the rate entry, which means that of course, it brings in the in and out percents from ITE, as well as the trip gen rate of 0.39 vehicles per unit. And since I use the rate, if I decided later that I wanted to change this, here's my 80 units. If I wanted to change this, I could do a couple different things. I could go back into that whole interface, or I could know that rates get applied linearly, right? So I can just go ahead and I could change this to 90 if my land use quantity changed, hit tab, and the updates happen automatically. If I had chosen the fitted curve, then I can't do that. And in fact, I can show you what that would look like instead. If I click the edit button here, it'll pull up for us everything that we had entered or chosen already previously. I had changed this to 90, and so it also changed it in here. Let's just, for the time being, put this back to 80 and hit calculate again. If I select fitted curve instead and click OK, then what you'll notice is that when it brings that data into Vistro, instead of picking rate, it picks the trips because it's bringing in the resulting trips that were calculated using the fitted curve. And then I have my trip data here. And so I would need to update the whole cell if I changed the land use quantity, but it's still pretty easy to do. I would just come back in here and pull that part up so I can get to the OK button and apply the average rate again. All right, so that basically takes care of the trip generation. I'm not going to go through today the distribution and the assignment. I think we've gone through how to do that before. What I am going to do, though, is pull up a second file where I already have that zone in, and I just want to show you a couple other land use types just real quick. So again, I'm going to duplicate my scenario and rename it something like 3 projects and make that active. And just out of, to highlight using Vistro for more than one land use, I can come in and add a couple other zones where there might be more projects occurring. Okay, so I've added zone 11 and 12 on top of 10. And let's just make sure you guys can see that too. Looks like it. Great. If I go back over to trip generation, switch table position, maybe move this a little. We know where 10 looks like with the 11 and 12 here. Let me log back in. If I was still in the same instance of Vistro, it would have remembered my login, but because I had these as separate instances, then at least I believe that's why it didn't remember it. But you can see it's pretty easy to log back in, no problem. And in this case, I'm going to put in a couple other land use types just so you get the gist of it, and then we'll move on to question and answer. But basically, in this case, we may have some retail. And variety store, let's put in. And again, we can pick, subsets of whatever is available to us. All sites, 1,000 square feet. Again, we want PM peak hour, vehicles, and I want to put in 20,000 square foot facility. Similar, I could have looked at the data plots, right? And then I do calculate. Okay, so there is no fitted curve for this example, so it tells me that. I'll just go ahead and use my average rate and add that in, and then we can do another land use type. Of course, I think you got to put something in before you can search. I clicked the wrong button. Let's go ahead and look at all right, well, I'm going on the fly here. All right, let's see. Let's just go ahead and add in our next land use here, fast food with the drive-through. And I think you get the idea. We can pick 1,000 square feet, pick our time period that we want, and put in our quantity. So it's just 2,400 to 2.4. And in this case, we'll do the average rate and apply that as well. So this hopefully helps you just to see how quick it is to be able to link to the ITE TripGen web app database, how we have our input to that in terms of the ability to select and edit what those values might be. My only tip or trick would be sometimes this comes in like here and you have to figure out how do you apply this, and you just float the window up a little bit and click the OK button. But otherwise, everything is in there, and then you're ready to proceed through your distribution and assignment steps and look at your results and do your mitigations. So with that, I'm not going to repeat all of the rest of those TIA components in this session, but hopefully that gives you a good feel for being able to use the trip generation data from ITE. Just on the same topic, you saw me change the quantity before. One of the other nice features with Vistro, of course, is once you have things set up, you can make those changes pretty quickly. And because everything's integrated throughout, including all your generation, distribution, and assignment, then everything can be refreshed with just literally with just tabbing out of that data entry. In terms of if you're doing sensitivity testing, or if your project requires you to change your land use quantity midstream. All right, with that, Adam, do you want to start the Q&A?
Yeah, actually, since you have this up already, Bill, there were two questions I think you could help out with.
Sure.
One was, basically, can you have multiple land use codes per zone, or like a super zone sort of concept?
Yeah.
The answer feature-wise is currently we don't have a super zone where you have one zone and then maybe 3 land uses associated with that one zone. We do have that idea on the list, and I mean, I really like that idea as well. But I think, Bill, you could probably show a workaround for that, to have multiple zones in like a parking lot or something.
Yeah, well, for sure. And this kind of is an example of that. I didn't bring the site plan in this time, but in our other longer webinar, we have the site plan for this site, and this is really one single developer. And in this case, I'm showing 2 of the zones that still haven't quite been built out yet. The main zone, which was a large family fun center, has been built, as you can see in this satellite image. But essentially what you would do, it can all be on one parcel. So peeling it back to the original question, which is every zone in Vistro represents a single land use. However, if you have a development such as this, where you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 zones, whatever you want to do, you would types of land uses, I should say, you would put them in as separate zones. That way, there's a couple benefits to that. Like anything, there's usually more than one way you can do things. But in this case, the benefits are, if you break down a large development into its respective land uses and have a zone for each of those land uses, then a few things become simpler. One, when I go in, I can use this TripGen tool to bring in the trip generation for that particular zone. secondly, when I move on to trip distribution, which we didn't talk about today, here we will put things in where you're distributing these trips. Those distribution percentages generally vary by your land use type. Okay, maybe not so much if it's like drive-through restaurant versus sit-down restaurant, but it would be vastly different typically if it's residential trip distribution versus retail trip distribution versus office trip distribution. So that's one reason why you would want the land uses separate anyway, because you need to distribute the trips ultimately, and they will each have their own characteristics for trip distribution as subparts of your project, even if it's multiple land uses within the same development project. Similarly for the trip assignment, okay, that's fine. It takes a little bit more work when you have multiple zones because you have to repeat it, but we have a lot of tools to help you do that automatically. The other way to do it right now is to say all of this is going to be one zone, and you decide, because you don't want to have to enter certain things more than once. That's fine. You could put zone 11 and 12 in just as a single zone, but then at that point you need to come up with your own aggregate trip generation. The downside is that you have to come up with the off model. You can't use this trip gen tool, and you won't be able to have separate distribution patterns. But the upside is you don't have to have as many paths in your network because there's only one zone representing it. But I think we've really made the path definition pretty straightforward, and we generate all the shortest paths for you anyway. My vote would be separate, exactly the way Vistro implements it, separate zones for each land use so that you can capture the trip distribution correctly and that you can utilize this ITE trip rate tool.
Okay. Let me think of the next question here. It was about, I think it was about the R-squared value. It was about in ITE, there's some sort of like confidence or suggestion about being able to select either between the average rate or being able to select the equation calculated rate or something like this. Yeah. So the one suggestion was, do we have something built in the software that would select one versus the other based off of these requirements? The answer is no. I mean, we have the capability to look at the PDFs for the fitted curve to see the R-squared value. So that's currently what's in the software. There was another question, could we have the R-squared value next to the fitted curve result? I believe that should be possible because we're receiving the R-squared value through the API from ITE. So that should be just a simple connection to receive that. We've heard that actually before from another user. So we have a issue or a feature for that, so we can also add you to that request. But Bill, do you have the example where the fitted curve data plot shows the R-squared?
Yeah, it'll show it even if you pick the if you pick the rate, whatever one you pick, it'll show it here if there is one for that particular land use. Some of the IT stuff, you know, let's see, some of it has very limited data to begin with, so use with caution, right? I think anybody who's done a lot of TIAs is aware of that particular constraint. Good points. Yeah, sure, we could maybe, you know, show R-squared without having to go into the data plot. The earlier question about which one, the guidance on which one to use, the person is correct. I haven't looked at the most recent, but I know that they have guidance. In the past, it used to be in a separate thing called the trip generation handbook or something, but now I think it's all integrated into the same trip generation document. But there's guidance on, with various considerations, let's just leave it very general like that, on when to use which.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, when to use which. Okay, good. So yeah, that is a very good point. We don't have that built in directly, so that's something that you need to take.
Use engineering judgment.
That's right.
everyone's favorite phrase.
It's so funny. I mean, I've been doing this for so long, and I know this isn't technically the correct thing with everything, but I still go back to my first job, and it was like, we use the rate for everything except for retail and office, and then you use the equation. Yeah. That was the rule of thumb back then, a long time ago. but there's a lot more guidance out there now and a lot of updated rates. So we definitely recommend that you familiarize yourself to the extent necessary with the procedures of the actual IDE trip generation manual. We just help facilitate the application of that data into our software.
All right. There was a question about internal capture. The question was, well, there's two parts here. One was about the internal capture. Just so you know, we did add that to the data model within 2023, and we're planning on making it a feature and a soon to come service pack, not this one coming out, but probably the one after that, where we'll have an internal capture field where you can basically say this is the percentage of what's being kind of not arriving from the site externally. So it will take that trip generator rate subtracted by that percentage, and then you'll end up with the final rate, and we'll have it all documented within the table so you can see what's going on there. So that should be able to handle that internal capture and keep everything internal within Vistro, and that would even make this trip generation feature more powerful. The other part to this, though, Bill, was how to account for pass-bys within the trip gen.
Yeah.
And we have that on the volumes tab if you want to show that.
Yeah, so the way we do pass-by in Vistro is that you enter that directly at the driveway. So the guidance is generate the primary trips and then adjust the for the pass-by at the driveway location. So here we would feasibly have 2 driveway locations, and so when you go back to that node for the volumes, I didn't do it in this field yet, but what you would do basically, if I have 10 trips from the south that are going to pass by into my site and come back out, then I handle that through the pass by entry on the volumes. And so my northbound through would be a -10 and my northbound right would be a +10. And then with the overall assumption that those trips come back to that in the same hour, then my westbound right will also end up with a +10. And then basically your link volume of that background 10 will be the same. We subtract 10 from the through, add it to the right, and then add it back in. And that's kind of the definition of a pass by. This is a simplistic form, single driveway. You again may have people come in the southern driveway and exit the northern driveway. And those are all things that you would need to kind of do off model in terms of your own site adjustments that are going on. But that's a pretty typical way to do it. It's hard to automate pass by when it's highly variant depending on the specific site. And then in the meantime, before we have internal capture in, the way to do it currently would be to adjust things either at the trip generation or the distribution level. We have examples of that as well.
Okay. Let's do one more TIA question before I jump over and answer a couple UTDF questions. I think better for the transition that way.
Sure.
The last TIA question, I believe I'm stating this right. Was there a way to duplicate the trip assignment? Where can we learn more about that? I think that's duplicate path under the trip assignment in the workflow. So
yeah, potentially, and they may also mean duplicate it like from the first scenario and make sure those same trips from the one zone occur in this next scenario. So let me start with that one because that's a little cleaner to describe, and also I know we only have a couple minutes, so I want to make sure you can get to your UTDF questions. But the way that I built things here again was all one scenario. If I would really go back to the base and put these in, but either way. When you're in your trip generation window, which we showed, one thing I didn't highlight was this. Any scenario you're in Vistro, you can still come through, no matter where your trip gen data is, you can still come through and deselect whether or not the trip generation really occurs in that scenario. So if I want to store this data, but I say that my fast food restaurant doesn't come on yet in this scenario, but it comes on in a future scenario, I can create another scenario and then turn the checkbox on there. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And the more you work with Vistro, and again, I highly recommend you watch the Vistro edition 5 from a year and a half ago. That's on our website because it talks about building it up from scratch and how to manage that through these checkboxes. That's one way. The other way is on the trip assignment table. If we look to switch our position, basically for any of the zones, you will end up with paths that you need to draw or have the software draw, which is what we did here, that will distribute and assign the trips between the zone and the gates. And those we can do automatically. We can duplicate them to make minor adjustments. You can manually redraw them to have trips in and out of all your different driveways or taking parallel roadways or whatever the case might be. All right, probably best for you to get to the UTDFs, Adam, before we go too long.
Yeah, there was a right click to duplicate the path on the line.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Yeah, so we have thanks. Yeah, we have a lot of options here for helping to make that expedient.
So I think that answers the question. It was, there's duplicate, it would copy it, and then you could change the percentage for both of those paths and modify one or the other to, or update it to wherever it needs to go, or the different street it might take to get there. And then the create reverse direction is another way to duplicate it, but it's in the opposite direction. And there was a question about one-way streets and if that's respected. So I believe if you duplicate something in the opposite direction along a one-way street, it reverses it. So just be aware of that. But if you're automatically creating paths, it will respect the one-way street. So if you're starting with a new path, it should respect the one-way street.
Okay.
All right. I do want to jump over and answer one question about UTDFs real fast, and then I think we did pretty well with the questions. And we will let you go. Okay, so back to my example model that I have. I'm just going to look at one intersection, the first one. And if I go to the intersection number graphic parameter that we have, you can see that it's named intersection 1, and the one next to it is intersection 2. For UTDFs, that is very important to say what the intersection is. I'm going to open the UTDF up in Excel so you can get a better view. Intersection number is in the intersection setup tab. And you could just type in whatever number you wanted. On the UTDF side, I'm going to pull over my Excel for that intersection. You can open the CSV up in Excel, change it, save it. We did fix the code. So the way Excel saves is CSV is that you get a bunch of commas after this lane group data title. Now in Vistro, we'll actually read that with the service pack that will be coming out. So don't worry about creating things in Excel and not having it work. It will work, hopefully. All right, so there's various attributes that are with each one of these UTDF files. Our help file that we'll publish with the service pack will include what attributes in Vistro we're actually respecting and using. So you'll see the list of attributes per file that you can use and how it is used. The next thing is this intersection ID here. So for example, this is for intersection 1. So it is for that intersection that we have here, intersection 1. And then the UTDF will, it has a certain nomenclature for the movement directions. So we have northbound left, northbound through, northbound right, for instance. That corresponds with this northbound left, northbound through, northbound right, volume, arrow, attribute, whatever it is. And it's the same thing as you go through the other intersections here. And that then will correspond to the Vistro table. You can see within the workflow table, we also have the turning movement left through right. It's assigned to this northbound approach. You just have the approach matches. You can change it within the newer versions of exactly right. And then, yeah, make sure that the turning movements are correct there. The one last thing is if you're using the phasing files or the timing files, this UTDF, here it is, has a slightly different structure. It's D1 through 8 or so, or whatever. D stands for more or less like detector, or that's kind of what I think of it as. It's like the signal phase, basically. And in the timing file, it's S1 through 8, which is probably for split, or more or less for split. But again, the numbers here correspond to the phases. It's not looking at the movement direction, it's assigning it to the specific phase, these parameters here. So that's pretty much how the UTDF structure is set up. Okay, I don't think we have any last minute questions, or Bill, did you see anything pop up at the very end?
No, other than a common theme was, will this be recorded? And it is being recorded. We had a number of people ask that. We didn't mention it, sorry about that. It being recorded, you should get a follow-up email. We will ultimately have it posted on our website along with all the other PTV Talks repository for Vistro. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, so then we'll conclude there. And Tiffany, was there anything else?
Nope, that was it. I'll see you guys next time, December 6th, for What's New on PTV Vism.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.